So fascinating. You did 3 decades of downhill mountain biking.
Yeah, I know. Showed my age, yeah.
You can't avoid this question. When do you think was your peak? Like, when do you say that was Greg Minnaar at his best? Like, we just saw Mike Tyson fight at 58.
Yeah.
It's not his best. We know when it was.
Yeah.
You know, when he was like 25 or whatever the number is, when he was knocking people out. Like, when did you say, you know what, I'm the proudest of that era in my career? Like, that's when I was my best. And I know you had these like resurgence all the time.
Well, I had like a long stint and probably my prime where I was really badly injured.
Okay.
And so my shoulder was dislocating all the time. And, you know, this year's been a lot of year where I've reflected a lot and I thought, shit, this is something I really regret. And that was like a period where I was like, well, actually, I can't regret doing what I did and trying to ride through it because there actually wasn't a surgery to fix it.
Yeah,
there was no one who had like a shoulder that's dislocated in motocross or anything and that had it fixed and was like, oh, shoulder's back to normal. Until I bumped into Gareth Swanepoel, South African motocrosser who was really good racing in the US and he had a shoulder problem. He went to this doctor in Johannesburg and this doctor fixed his shoulder. And so it took me forever to get into this doctor to see him. And so in 2007, when my shoulder was completely destroyed, this guy fixed it up. And then, you know, I was 27, 28 and I came back in 2008 and probably had the most amazing season in my career. To me, that 2008 year was so good.
So that was probably your prime. And what I'm hearing is, if it wasn't for the shoulder, those years where you try to battle through, do you think that was when like your 100% run could beat anyone's 100% run?
It was hard because, you know, there was a Sam Hill era and Sam could turn it up.
I was going to say,
you know,
was he the hardest to beat if he put his 100% run in 105 and you put in yours on a certain track? Like, you couldn't beat him, right? Sam was like fairly like he could do that on some tracks.
It was so interesting because he had such an amazing style and such a great rider, but he could just turn it up and you wouldn't know where it was. It might even be on like a track that typically you wouldn't think it would be good on. He would just have this way exceed everything.
New Zealand Worlds,
yeah,
right,
and so yeah, it was really hard to go into track going, oh, this one suits me compared to him, because you just never knew.
That's interesting.
So yeah, so it was through that era and it was cool, but like that shoulder was just like, you know, I remember Montserrat like having a great run. I ended up second. I think I was second by like, I don't know, second or second and a half. But coming out of the section, my shoulder dislocates and I'm like, oh. So I'm just like swinging this thing and I can't get it back in. So I pull off the track. And as I pull off, I hit a bump and my shoulder goes back in. And I was like, oh, back on track and keep going. I mean, so through that period was terrible.
Bro, you dislocated your shoulder walking the Champri track.
Yeah.
I was with you. I just remembered that.
Yeah.
We were walking down the track and you kind of jumped down a section, slipped, and you were like, it's out. I'm like, what do you mean it's out? You didn't fall.
Yeah. So
yeah,
that's a bit I regret. So there was like...
But you can't regret it because there was no op.
True. So from 2001 to 2007 was just, I think, a bit of racing where I wasn't able to be my best.
And was that, when did you first injure it? Was that Caprun?
At the end of 2001.
Yeah, Caprun.
No, so
not Caprun.
It was somewhere in France. End of season. I just beat Nico in the World Cup overall.
That's so ironic.
And I was like 19 years old and they put on this Nico invitation race in France somewhere. I can't remember where it was.
Brest?
No, it was some really gnarly place, like really gnarly track. And like, I think it was kind of a, you know, let's bring this young South African to France and let's see who really is the best rider. And I just remember the post that was like a picture of me, World Cup champion versus Nico, you know.
Oh, they bigged it up.
And it was, you know, and I was practicing with David Vasquez and I slipped on a root of a tree, took a crash, thought I broke my collarbone. So I was like, shit, David, I broke my collarbone. Just have a look. And I like pulling my shirt up and he looks at it, he goes, ooh. And then he just pedaled off down the hill and left me there. And I was like, wow. And so I looked down, my shoulder was on my chest. And so I sat there holding my arm until this marshal came and he was trying to put it back in. He was like, one guy was holding me around the waist, the other guy was pulling my arm forward. And eventually I pushed the guy away. I was like, I don't think you know what you're doing because it's not working, yeah. And I just sat there holding my arm. I mean, I could get comfortable with it. It wasn't crazy sore. And then the doctor came and he injected me with something and put my shoulder back. And so I recovered from that all right. But since then, my shoulder would dislocate posterior. Posterior, right? Forward.
Anyway, not clued up on that.
We're going to Fort William, World Championships 2007. And I have a great top half. I go into the woods. And at that point, I was having this like exterior kind of support to try and keep my shoulder from dislocating. So it was like brace around my bicep, brace around my chest with this kind of like exterior taping to stop my shoulder being able to dislocate out. And I slipped in the woods. I didn't have the shoulder strength to push through off the bars. And so I ended up going over the bars. So I'd flip over and I knew I was good in Fort William. So I was like, World Champs, I have to get up and keep going. So I grab a bike and I like pedal off and I'm like, I'm not feeling too comfortable. But you know, from the woods down, it's a fair way, but it's not crazy tech or anything. Back then it was kind of fast. And I got across the finish line, I was 4th place. And I was like, oh, you know, like missed out on the podium. And I was pretty disappointed. A friend came and gave me a pat on the back and he's like, oh shit, dude, there's something wrong with your back. I was like, what do you mean? He goes, no, there's bone sticking out. So what? So I go to the medics and my shoulder's dislocated, but I've broken the scapula. So the scapula's like flaring. And I was like, oh shit. So I go to the hospital and they're like, you've dislocated your shoulder. We need to put it back in. But right then I knew it was like the end of Honda. I'd really known prior that this was our last race and I wanted to be at the team dinner and to thank everyone. And so I was like, well, we need to put this shoulder back in. I need to get to team dinner. So can you speed it up? And they're like, oh, we got this specialist coming in. You've dislocated posterior or whatever. And I'm like, it's definitely not, because if it is, I can put it back in. I'll swing it back in. And
I'm experienced in this.
Yeah. And it can't be. So it must be dislocated anterior.
Yeah.
And they go, no, it's definitely posterior. So these guys try. And they're like wrapping these towels and pulling and same thing, nothing happens. So they said, well, now we've called a specialist in from Inverness. It's going to take an hour and a half for her to come in. Anyway, she comes and she goes, yeah, it's definitely dislocated anterior, but we need to put it in. We're going to have to put you under. And I'm like, there's no ways I'm going under. I said, just give me that gas again. We need to flip and get the shoulder
what's the pain like during having a dislocated shoulder?
I don't know. It's bearable.
Okay.
Like crazy, yeah. So anyway, we got it back in and managed to make the end of team dinner and a bit of the after party. It was, but yeah, that was my shoulder and it was completely ruined from there. So once I got it fixed, end of 2007, it was like a new lease of life.